Wait, I'm sorry, what? What up, Sonic Squad? Today we're gonna go over the spectacle of Sonic Frontiers. This game was made with a lot of love and style, which shines through in many areas, so let's do it to it! Before the video starts, there are a few things I need to go over really quickly. For starters, Sonic Frontiers is a very large game with a lot of moving parts and aspects to it, so in order to cover everything, I'm going to be splitting this up into two parts. One releasing today and the second releasing this Friday. Finally, I will be going over each attack that the average player should have before each Titan fight, using the inputs for the Xbox controller, which looks like this. Now, with that all out of the way, let's start the spectacle of Sonic Frontiers. First up is Giganto, which is this giant humanoid titan that you fight on the first island. Before even talking about its introduction and fight, I'd love to discuss his design. When I first saw the Sonic Frontiers Vandalized trailer and his face was first shown, the ominous rows of teeth shifting into place while it just stared blankly at the camera, I got chills. I was genuinely really creeped out by the design, and I was very excited to eventually fight him. Looking at its design, there isn't much super special about it, just kind of your standard Evangelion Angel type. It stands on its legs, has a huge upper body and two long arms. On more of a general note of the Titans, I love how their surface texture is always changing from geometric patterns to a smooth texture, with red flashes of energy in between. It really makes them feel like giant machines rather than just giant monsters. Giganto's introduction is absolutely immaculate, even for just the first boss. At this point, you've talked to Amy and you are aware that there are 3 Titans to fight. So when Sage just spawns this guy in, it is immediately clear you're going to have to take it on. Sonic looks up at Giganto, demonstrating the scale that we're dealing with in one cinematic shot. Sonic then proceeds to dodge him, simply walking, barely dodging I might add. Giganto then throws him up in the air and chucks him through a tower into the cliffside. And right there, we see that base form Sonic is not going to cut it when dealing with the Titans, and that the Chaos Emeralds will be a necessity moving forward in order to defeat them. I think this adds to really making Giganto feel threatening, not just like a typical robot that you can blast through by holding down the X button. It makes him feel like a boss, a threat that should be taken seriously, and I feel like they executed that very well in this game, with most of the Titans, if not all. So, you enjoy a good 3 hours of gameplay doing island challenges, having a panic attack over 1-2, and collecting 6 of the 7 Chaos Emeralds, leading up to the inevitable showdown. Something to add here is that if you go to the top of this tower, you can see into the arena where Giganto is, and Giganto is actually there, just waiting for you, and specifically you. Giganto is never gone from the island, just temporarily out of sight unless you go looking for it, and that really helps build up its looming presence as something that is an inevitability. It can't be avoided. You're going to have to fight him in order to free your friends. Before talking about the fight itself, it's time for the first attack segment. By the time you reach Giganto, and consequentially also have finished the first island, most players should have 4 attacks: the Grand Slam, Wild Rush, Stomp, and Phantom Rush. To trigger the Grand Slam, you need to parry an enemy's attack by holding LB and RB. You get this attack after freeing Amy from her cyber cage. I think it looks amazing, and the hard-hitting animation definitely adds a lot to it. There's a reason this attack was shown off in the trailer. Next up is the Wild Rush, triggered by hitting LB or RB and then X, which can be comboed by dodging an attack by pressing LB or RB, then launching a counterattack by hitting X. Sonic dashes in straight lines until he hits his target for some pretty decent damage. I think it looks pretty good, and overall this is a very easy move to work into combos, and it's very efficient. Next up is the Stomp. The Stomp is triggered by pressing B during a combo. It raises Sonic above the enemy's head, and he stomps on it. Enough said. Now, the Phantom Rush can only be triggered by getting a high enough combo score, then rapidly pressing X for some Dragon Ball Z style rapid punches. It is very effective, and it looks pretty cool as well. Lastly, we have the Sonic Boom. The Sonic Boom is triggered by holding down LT, where Sonic shoots off slashes of energy at his target until you let go of the trigger. This move can be very useful, but it can also be very easily abused at the player's whim. Besides that, it looks pretty cool. And that concludes the first Arcturus attack review. Finally, we can talk about the fight. We have a short cutscene where Sonic reaches the top of the cliffside and the camera cuts to a small corridor, and we hear Giganto's ear-piercing screech, alerting us that he is close, just off in the distance. The music gets more dramatic as Sonic boosts over a small pond, and then he runs through the corridor, leading to the valley where the camera pans to Giganto with that iconic shot of its face, lifelessly staring at you with one sole purpose in mind. But that won't stop our blue boy, as he jumps and climbs his way to the top of Giganto to acquire the 7th and final Chaos Emerald, allowing him to turn into Super Sonic, and the power dynamic immediately shifts. We can see this from Sonic's expression turning from a serious stare to a somewhat confident smile. Something else to note is that previously, Sonic has never been at face level with Giganto unless he's getting thrown across the island. So floating as Super Sonic level with Giganto was a great thematic choice, showing that now the power has shifted. As Undefeatable begins playing in the background, the tone immediately shifts, just kicks into overdrive as the fight begins. Tomoya Otani and Kellen Quinn just giving their absolute awesome backtrack for an absolutely incredible fight. Going in to attack Giganto, Sonic can try to hit him head on, go for the chest, shoulders, or arms. He has a lot of options. Attacking the head will see Giganto physically reacting by moving his head and trying to swat you away with his big scratches and swipes. If one hit lands, you get thrown to the back of the arena. It's a solid punishment considering that Super Sonic can't be physically damaged, so setting back your progress and draining your rings at the same time, that was a very smart choice. However, the flip side of that is parrying the attack, which leads to a short scripted segment where Sonic's spin blade grinds right on Giganto's teeth, breaking his ball form to flip back and kick him with an army of Phantom Rush clones, sending Giganto crashing right into the ground. Showing the weight and power behind this attack, paired with the dynamic camera angles, motion blur, particle effects, and turning off the UI, it makes this fight look like a movie. But there are more than just standard attacks that every player will see in their playthrough. For those who want to go the extra mile, there are Psy-Loop combos and interactions. Psy-Looping Giganto successfully sends him flying into the air, with this super tornado keeping him suspended, allowing you to fire off some powerful attacks before he slams back into the ground. Now at this point, many players should be at the half health mark, which Giganto sprouts little rods of energy, lighting up lasers that send Sonic flying away when he gets hit by one, just like if Giganto were to hit them himself. This really adds to the scene and spectacle, limiting your damage areas to its chest and head, which becomes harder to hit as Giganto's attacks ramp up. They get faster, stronger, more unpredictable, and while they're still very easy to parry and telegraph, that doesn't make them lose the weight that they still have. You're losing rings. At this point, you should be lower on rings, especially if it's your first time through, and that can be really scary. All of this starts leading to quick time events, where you have to deflect its direct laser blast by spamming X as hard as you possibly can, throwing it behind you to hit something else. The second QTE being where it throws you into its mouth and Sonic has to break free from Giganto's teeth crushing it. I will say, the fight just looks better at night in general, with the lasers and everything, but unfortunately I couldn't capture that footage, so rest in peace. Anyways, rinse and repeat the attacks and QTEs, and finally, Giganto has run out of energy and health, lying on its knees like a defeated man, waiting for its execution. Sonic flies back, powered up, with that signature smirk, and boosts directly through Giganto's chest, where we get an awesome side shot of him flying through Giganto, as the blast leads into an explosion that flashes the screen, shrinking, then imploding in on itself. As Sonic smiles, floating high above the ground, knowing that his job just got a whole lot easier. With experience fighting the Titan, he's more prepared for the next one. Meeting up with Amy, he then flies off to the second island. It's time for the second Arcturus attack review. By the time the player has finished the second island, they should have acquired the Quick Psy-Loop, Homing Shot, and Spin Slash. The Quick Psy-Loop can be triggered by pressing Y during a combo, and is essentially an easy way to Psy-Loop an enemy without breaking the pace of the fight. Overall, I think it looks pretty nice, and it's very effective. Next is the Homing Shot. To activate this, you press RT and X. Sonic will make 10 copies of his ball form and shoot them at the enemy. It's pretty nice looking and effective. Pretty good move, all things considered. Lastly, we have the Spin Slash. Similar to the Cyclone Kick, it's triggered by holding A during a combo. This shows Sonic curling up into his ball form and circling around an enemy, hitting one huge strike of damage after building up all that speed from the Rapid Donuts. Overall, it's a pretty effective and fun alternative to the Cyclone Kick, and I definitely enjoyed using it. Next up is the Wyvern, which, for starters, is just the coolest boss name ever. Like, Giganto, yeah, we kind of get it, the dude is huge, and the Knight is just, well, the Knight, and we'll talk about him later. But the Wyvern just sounds intimidating. Wyverns are typically depicted in fiction as dragon-like fantasy beasts, but this Wyvern looks more like a silverfish mixed with a wolf on cyber steroids. Its giant claws that can do some major damage when the hit connects, a huge snout / mouth that can and will crush you, similar to Giganto, but we don't need to worry about its physical features right now. Right now, Sonic needs to run! Sage awakens the Wyvern's anger against Sonic as it begins to outrun and evade a barrage of missiles shot from the Flying Freak, running you around the starting desert with small platforming challenges and the missiles in front of you and the Wyvern right on your tail. It's a really tense encounter since we've already seen how powerful Giganto is without using weapons, and it wasn't chasing you. Sonic eventually takes cover under a few rocks. However, unlike Giganto, after your first encounter, the Wyvern doesn't disappear. It continues flying above the island while you run around, enjoying another 3 hours of gameplay. Objectively, the best island too. This keeps it in the player's and Sonic's mind, being reminded that it's still there and it's still a very real threat, looming over you, and you know that you're powerless against it at this stage. Getting to the fight, the Wyvern picks you up and makes you run along strands of cyber energy in order to catch up to it, landing on its head, still flying above the entire island, mind you. And becoming supersonic, Breakthrough It All starts playing with that awesome opening, as Sonic flies alongside the Wyvern, getting a good look at it while it weaves its way through the air, flying at high speeds above the island, preparing to begin the attack. The song kicks into heavier, more aggressive chords, and it's all up to you now. Sonic flies behind the Wyvern as it launches missiles, which Sonic has to parry in order to stun the Wyvern, allowing him to speed up to the head for the confrontation. The Wyvern, still unstunned at this point, will swipe at Sonic with its large claws, which you need to parry in order to not repeat the missile parrying sequence. After you successfully deflect its attack, this opens up the Monolith Machine, allowing Sonic to start wailing on it, still for the last time, while flying over all the huge island, just duking it out in the skies above. It looks absolutely crazy. During this time, you can commit a menagerie of combos, including an exclusive Psyloop interaction where the Wyvern is chained in place, allowing for more complex attacks rather than the quick ones Sonic was forced to fire off while it was moving. Sonic can also parry the Wyvern again during this time, leading to a scene where he grabs it by the tail and throws it into a freaking mountain. As for a split second, we see the debris fall behind Sonic as he just looking angry as all get out. It's insane. On top of that, this parry interaction takes out a pretty decent chunk of his health as well. Once getting to the halfway mark on the health bar, the Wyvern ejects the same rods that Giganto did, firing off sound waves that will blast Sonic away from the fight if they hit them, throwing him behind the Wyvern and wasting time as his ring counter counts down, giving a spectacular image of Sonic trying to catch up to the Wyvern, dodging bright red sound waves and parrying the missiles, eventually catching up to the Wyvern for one final time, parrying its two massive swipes, one powerful blow after the other, wailing on its head, leading into a QTE. The Wyvern surrounds Sonic in a sort of circling formation, launching a barrage of missiles at him, which, by the way, reminds me of that scene in the Sonic movie. Sonic then speeds around, grabbing them all into a ball and kicking it directly at the Wyvern's head for a massive damage cut. The explosion, everything, the animation just makes it feel so smooth, and it makes the actual damage feel very heavy. The Wyvern then flies up far into the sky and comes crashing down in a spinning fury like ballistic missile on a crash course. Sonic, through another QTE, stops it dead in its tracks, having more missiles fired at him, dodging and maneuvering around them, leading them into the Wyvern's gaping mouth, into another QTE, where he shoves the mouth open, finishing it off in one spectacular explosion, similar to that of Giganto's, ending on this raw shot of Sonic looking down with a stoic expression at the explosion, now 2/3 done with his mission and incredibly close to saving his friends. Welcome back to the Arcturus attack review. By the time you finish the 3rd island, you should have a few new moves to try out on the Knight, so let's go through them. The new move you unlock through story progression is the Cyclone Kick. Holding the X button during a combo triggers the move, which sees Sonic circling an enemy and rapidly speeding up with blue energy rings circling around him, ending by throwing him up into the air, which pairs well with a stomp right after. This attack is triggered by pressing RT and B during a combo. It sees Sonic swing up in a large loop motion, then swinging back down in a kicking stance, throwing himself into the enemy. The camera really sells the speed and scope of this attack, getting closer as Sonic loops back to the enemy, and it looks pretty cool as well. The animation is very fluid and everything rushes right like a river. Lastly, we have the Recovery Smash. Disclaimer, you can't use this one in Supersonic boss fights. Triggered by pressing A after a prompt, which comes after being hit or knocked back by an enemy. If you press the prompt in time, Sonic will launch himself in his ball form towards the enemy, doing significant damage and saving you from losing rings. I don't have any particular feelings about this move. I think it looks just fine. Personally, I prefer the Recovery Smash, but that's just me. The move still functions absolutely perfectly. The Knight! Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. The Knight is easily one of the scariest Titan boss fights from its introduction. Falling out of the sky with the camera once again being aimed from the ground to make it look huge. The thing that makes the Knight scary isn't its design like it was with Giganto. It's how powerful it's built up to be, slamming back down into the ground as it charges up its shield. Sage looks at Sonic and she asks, "What will you do now?" Thinking she has him cornered with nowhere left to run. Sonic just looks off screen and says, "The best I can," and speeds off onto a Squid Guardian, beginning the chase. Now, I don't know about y'all, but that really got me hyped for the chase sequence. Hearing Sonic be confident and not reply with some stupid cocky joke like, "I'm gonna kick its butt," or something like that, like he would have probably about 5 years ago, he just says honestly what he's going to do, the best he can. Interestingly enough, the Knight actually doesn't take you on itself like the other Titans. Instead, the chase consists of Sonic avoiding a shield from throwing you off the squid, ending much differently from the other introductions. There isn't any hiding or getting beat up. Sonic doesn't just survive, he thrives, throwing the squid in front of the shield, destroying one and sending the other back to its master. And that is how you kick off the 3rd island. Immediately, right there, the Knight is just built up as a threat. You do not want to mess with it. And unlike Giganto, where its disappearance was kind of confusing, with the Knight disappearing, you're glad. You don't want that thing roaming around the island just waiting for you to attack it. While it's gone, it gives you an opportunity to get the Chaos Emeralds. It feels less like hiding resources or just kind of throwing it out of the player's view, and it feels more like it's giving you a chance. It's giving you an opportunity, and Sonic is going to take that opportunity. The Knight then disappears out of sight for the next 3 hours, as aforementioned, until Sonic sets off an explosion in the volcano, demolishing some loser's pinball score. The lava from said explosion then flowing into a crater, breaking the moist mist, realizing that it's been there under your nose the entire time. I just need to say I love the setting of a crater, because it feels like less of a situation where if Sonic was losing, he could just run away. You fought Giganto in an arena, sure, but the walls weren't high enough to stop you or it from escaping. And in the Wyvern fight, you were trying to keep up with the beast, so running away isn't practical. But not here. Even with the setting of the crater, either of them could escape, but they choose to stay and duke it out, because it isn't a fight for the sake of a fight. For Sonic, this is the last thing he has to do before saving his friends, at least to his knowledge. As the Knight comes near, the danger is very clear. However, the hyperactive Hedgehog has no fear. Jumping out of sight returns the Knight, its gigantic size giving quite a fright, but that won't stop Sonic, because he's ready for a fight. At the bottom of the crater, the Knight spins around the arena, launching spike waves at Sonic, which he can dodge or parry. When the Knight launches its hand at Sonic, revealing rails leading up to its main body, we get a cool scene of Sonic grinding up to the Knight, launching onto his body, and for the 3rd time, reclaiming the 7th Purple Chaos Emerald. Find Your Flame kicks in with an incredibly strong opening, with power chords going right into the vocals. Floating on eye level with the knight, it spins around the arena once again, almost to taunt Sonic, as he can't hit it very well while it's moving. Eventually, the knight attacks Sonic, which he can parry, allowing him to get closer and attack the shield. But the knight just swats Sonic away with the shield, throwing him back. The shield sprouts spikes, they begin to glow and spin, demonstrating the imminent danger Sonic is in. Then the knight throws it towards him, leading into a QTE, where Sonic dodges the shield, lands on top of it, and then proceeds to take control of it, guiding it right back to the knight, grinding it directly in its face, finally opening it up for attacks. During which, Sonic will just wail on this thing non-stop. If Sonic parries an attack, you will get this scene where he bounces around in its spinball form, knocking it up and down, hitting the legs, throwing it into the ground, uppercutting the monstrous machine into the air, and then spin kicking it right back down into the ground. Everything about that scene just feels right. It gets you hyped. Sonic has more experience with these beasts now, and he isn't just going to go in for a simple kill. He's going to absolutely demolish this Titan, without holding back either. The animations and expressions show this. While normally Sonic would be grinning with that classic smug smirk pulling off these tricks, but now he's keeping a serious face, not letting his guard down, and putting weight and power behind all of his attacks. After this, you go back to attacking the knight's head, and using the quick side loop, gets the knight shot up into the air by spikes of super chaos energy as the camera pans up from the ground. But not this time to show fear. This time, it's to show strength, visualizing how Sonic is now on par, if not stronger than these Titans. Flying up to the knight with the chaos energy, swirling around Sonic as he combos the knight. Side looping the knight again will impale him with one large chaos spear right back into the ground. All of these crazy attacks added with the cinematic camera angles and the amazing particle and lighting effects, not to mention the graphics, it elevates this experience from a 10 to 11. And we're still not done yet. After getting the knight to half health, it throws its shield again, bouncing around the crater, and if it hits Sonic, it sends him flying into the side of the crater, just like it would if the knight hits Sonic. Parrying the shield allows you to throw it back to the knight, knocking it in the face, once again opening it up for attacks. You should take this opportunity to finish off the knight, leading into the coolest Titan death in the entire game. The knight extends its sword and goes for Sonic with one gigantic swing, but Sonic blocks its attack by stopping the sword dead in its tracks. He lightens up for a bit, before the knight shoots him up into the air, slamming it back down into the ground and throwing his sword into the side of the crater, putting full force onto Sonic against the wall, prompting a QTE where Sonic pushes the sword back and kicks it out of his way. Sonic then flies and weaves through the Titan's attacks, working its way up to the knight's face, and just sucker punching it directly in said face, throwing the knight back, losing control of its sword, which goes flying into the side of the crater. Seizing the opportunity, Sonic side loops the sword, removing it from the ground, where the camera pans out, showing it to rise into the air on the position to come down to the knight. The camera then zooms back in to show Sonic holding it, then bringing it down onto the knight, slashing through its entire body. Splitting it in half before exploding in the same grandiose fashion we witnessed before. And now, to his knowledge, Sonic is done. That was the last Titan. His friends should be saved. And he really does think that, but as we all know, there was 1.5 more islands left to go, but that's not important right now. The Titan bosses are easily the highest highs of Sonic Frontiers. While the game has a lot of fronts to improve on, the best parts are easily the open world, cyberspace, and the Titan bosses. They provide a real showcase of that signature Sonic style, and we are all better for it. If you like this video, consider subscribing to me or liking the video. This has easily been my largest project so far, and this is only part 1. Later, we should be discussing the spectacle of the open world and cyberspace. So if that interests you, stick around, and remember, keep up that momentum. Also, I have a Twitch now.